Okay, guys, welcome to the It's More Than Just Money movement channel. And you know that this part of the channel is the winner circle, where we bring you people that are doing amazing work in South Africa and abroad. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do click on the subscribe button, click on that notifications bell so that you don't miss any of our upcoming interviews. We're going to be bringing more content for you guys, content that is bringing people that are inspiring, people that are committed to making a difference in society. And today, I am sitting with Bianca van Wyk, and she's an attorney. I've known her for a couple of years now, and I reached out to her and said, listen, I know you've got a story, and I would appreciate if that story makes it to the winner circle so that my audience, you guys, can benefit from this story. And we're sitting at their offices at EYS Stewart in Pretoria, South Africa. And yeah, we are comfortable. We don't have aircon on.
Thank you for having me and welcome to our
You don't
offices.
know the aircon story, right?
No, I don't know the aircon story.
I had an interview that dropped last week with James Paris. So he's a white guy, right?
Yes.
And I said to him, we were sitting, but I had my jacket, and I put my jacket on the chair. He didn't have a jersey on.
Okay.
And as we're sitting, he wanted the aircon on. Of course, white people love aircon.
So
right?
true.
So during the interview, I take my jacket, I put it on. I'm like, Chief, I told you black people and aircon don't go along.
Yes.
So anywhere in South Africa, in the office spaces, you'll find the aircon is on, the white people don't have any jackets on, and the black people have got jackets on. So
Yeah, that's my partner,
luckily,
myself,
when I
every
put
day.
my jacket-
It's genuinely cold in Pretoria, hence the scarf. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
I'm happy you took the chance to sit down with me, because I think that people are going to benefit from your story. But you know that with every glory, because a lot of people look at what a person has achieved.
Yes.
Maybe they'll say, you're a director at such a young age. You're an attorney, but they don't understand the story behind the glory, you know?
Yes.
The accolades that we see, the awards that we see. Where does your story start? And if you were to be given a chance to tell your story in your own way, you know, when they say that if the lion doesn't write down its story, the story will be always narrated by the hunters.
Yes, that's so true. So thanks for the opportunity again. So yes, born and raised in Johannesburg. My dad is Portuguese and my mom's Indian.
Portuguese?
Yes.
You speak Portuguese?
Well, I haven't practiced in many years, and I'll tell you why. Married a colored man with the surname van Wyk. So I always say I'm proudly South African. I've got all different flavors in me. From Johannesburg, I went to KwaZulu-Natal. So completed my schooling there and started my LLB. Always wanted to be an attorney from a very young age. I think my dad was very involved in politics and CNN. We watch CNN very often in our home. So it was a very intellectual environment, including my mom, because they got married during apartheid. And that obviously...
Wasn't that a risk?
Big risk, but having the mom that I did, an Indian woman that was intelligent, beautiful, but a go-getter. She did something with her life and, you know, worked her way up into management in Anglo-America. She had a nursing background. Now at the age of 70, she's reinvented herself. She started a business.
What?
Placement agency for nurses, etc. So, you know, that's the lineage I come from. But the story behind the story is that my parents' marriage didn't last. So at the age of 4, my parents got divorced. There was a lot of abuse that was going on. And that obviously cut the relationship with my dad. So I grew up in a single parent home and, you know, really watched my mom work very hard. I've got 2 older brothers, the youngest, and I'm the only girl. So having this in my mind, I understood that I need to make it happen for myself. I need to focus. I need to do something with my life. And that's the message that I interpreted from my mom, not to be dependent on a man because the relationship obviously failed with my dad and that obviously cut our relationship. And so from there, got a bursary to study at the University of Pretoria. Here I was baptized into Afrikaans culture. In KwaZulu-Natal, there's not a lot of Afrikaans people. So came here, didn't really understand Afrikaans so well. Came to the University of Pretoria, no family, no friends, packed up what I had, came to stay at the res.
Was that when you were doing your LLB?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Here at University of Pretoria. Graduated in 2010 with my LLB. Made a few dean's lists while I was here. And
what's the dean's list for?
So that's over 75%, your average for the year.
You're a nerd.
Okay. Yeah, you come to realize being a nerd has its place in society, but experience does distinguish the men from the boys, in a sense, or the women from the girls. So obviously coming here, getting used to the culture, the people, being in a bigger city, because, growing up in Johannesburg, I was very sheltered with my older brothers, and now I was here by myself. So I needed to make decisions to say, listen, I'm focusing on developing myself rather than parting, relationships. I kept all of that in abeyance so that I could get where I need to go. And so graduated, started my articles, and that was hectic. I was really baptized into adulting 101. Small salary. Yes, small salary, big expenses.
How much did you start with? I mean, for those that are aspiring to be attorneys.
5,000 Rand.
That was not bad.
In 2011.
2011.
Yes.
Okay, that was bad.
5,000 Rand.
Lawyer, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So obviously now needing to pay for accommodation. My brother was...
From $5,000.
From $5,000. And also food. And also petrol. My brother was gracious enough to give me his car that my parents had for him. So that helped a lot. And at that time, I was, if you could put 20 Rand petrol to get to and from work, that's what I was doing. I started off with litigation, and it was something that I thought, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. But, as life happens, you start realizing the world is bigger than the pond that you're from. And so getting exposed to other aspects of law, I realized that an LLB for me now is like a matric. Everyone has an LLB. That's how it felt. So I said, no, I'm going to go and study further, knowing that we don't have funds. I mean, my parents worked for their money, and mind you, my dad didn't contribute to our living expenses or maintenance. It was my mom who did that. And I knew that I needed to work hard. That's why I got the bursary. In my final year, I needed to take out a loan because my mom got very sick with swine flu. She was in ICU
Final
for
year
6.
of LLM.
LLB.
The LLB,
So I had to take out a student loan to pay for that year. And so I was sitting with a student loan, 5,000 Rand salary.
Doesn't cover the
Baptized into articles and the reality of this is not law and order. The law in South Africa is very different. The court systems are different. It's not something that's prestigious and fancy. You've got to work hard to get where you need to go. And our industry, it's changing slowly, but very male-dominated industry. So coming in as a female, and also a female of color, there's those challenges. People might not want to acknowledge it, but there are those challenges.
What are some of the challenges that you think you went through and overcome?
Well, not coming from a very affluent home, I needed to really work hard to get a bursary, get funding.
Black tax, people.
Black tax. And realizing that if I don't do something with my life, I'm just going to go into oblivion with nothing. And poverty is a reality. Our family was a middle-class family, but middle class and poverty there's a fine line between the two, and that's a paycheck. Coming from apartheid, as I mentioned, my parents had the notion that you go to school, you study, and you go and work for somebody. And so that has also been something that's been unraveling in my life, realizing that there's certain mindsets that we grew up with, limitations that we need to now exceed because there's so much more that the world has to offer, and the world has changed in terms of women in the workplace, opportunities, technology. So those are the kinds of things that I needed to look at. The second thing was a language barrier and culture. I found that here in Pretoria, it was very Afrikaans, white dominated. So now coming in, most of my meetings were held in Afrikaans.
Really?
Had pleadings in Afrikaans, yep.
You had to write pleadings in Afrikaans?
Yes, when I first started with my articles, I had some pleadings that were in Afrikaans, and I was sitting there with a blue woordeboek trying to find the words. And there weren't people there that were going to help me. I mean, it's sink or swim. Call you to the boardroom and they're introducing you to the company or having a finance meeting and everything is in Afrikaans. So I determined to learn Afrikaans, but I don't speak Afrikaans. So I can hold a conversation with someone who speaks Afrikaans, but I will not respond in Afrikaans purely because my sentence construction is not great. And I think if people had to hear me speaking Afrikaans, they might think that I don't have a degree or I don't have an education, or I don't have anything to offer. Also, there's stereotypes. Walking into a room, being a female and a female of color, there is that notion that you're automatically undermined. So you have to prove yourself.
Yeah.
And so overcoming...
Did that get to you wanting to then maybe want to speak Afrikaans to prove that you are there on the same level with the person who has that expectation? Or was it a matter of, I'm here to do what I need to do? And given the fact that eventually, you're a director,
yes,
it means you didn't remain there. There are certain things that you did to get yourself to the top. What are those things?
One of them, I think, is resilience. As I mentioned, my mom, I really gleaned that from her life, and perseverance, just to persevere. She went through divorce, her career changed, she lost everything during that period. My mom had to rebuild several times, even relocating to KZN and starting a new life.
Was it Chatsworth?
No. She stays in Hilton. It's a little town outside of Pietermaritzburg.
Okay, I know Hilton.
Yes, it's on the way to Durban. So you get Howick and then you have Hilton.
Yeah.
So my mom is residing
the
there.
Hilton Hotel is the Protea Hotel there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's been taken over now by another franchise, or they've changed their name if I'm not mistaken. But your resilience is one of them. So initially it angered me, and I think if I look back, because this is my 11th year admitted, there was a lot of emotional maturity I needed to gain. And I think only life experience can really help you with that. And also the circle of friends and mentors you have around you. And I was very intentional about getting mentors, male mentors, which would be father figures that I could have a sounding board of. And I found that in the church. Pastors and elders that were there that took me in as a daughter, and mentored me.
Did you know you needed male mentors at the time? Sorry, that's catching my attention because you were a young female at the time. You had your mother,
yes,
who was demonstrating to you what it means to be a woman.
Yes.
But then on the other hand, you didn't have much of a relationship with your father, which means that could have created some sort of limiting beliefs in a way.
Yes.
So how did you know you needed to have male mentors? Or it's just something that happened by osmosis because you're in the church environment and they were there, maybe they spotted you? Or did you spot them and say, I need a mentor?
So I don't think it happened organically, but I needed to identify the deficits of fatherlessness. And we need to stop living in denial about the fact that we don't need father figures or mother figures in our lives. We need mentors. We need those that have gone ahead of us, whether it be in our career, whether it be relationally, from a friendship perspective, family perspective, business perspective. We need those that are going to look back and say, I can help you, because we don't have all the answers. And I recognized that I had a lot of anger issues, but I struggled to submit to male authority.
Ooh.
I found that I was in constant contention with them. I competed also a lot I didn't really compete with my female colleagues, but with males. I wanted to prove a point because there was this drive in me to say, I am something, I am somebody. And one thing a father does do is he casts identity on his children and a sense of worth. And especially for a female, you could either go to two extremes. You could be running after male attention, or you could just totally withdraw yourself and actually become antagonistic and hostile to males. And I found that's how I was. And with my first year of articles, I realized, because I was confrontational and contentious, that this was going to mess up my career, and it was also going to mess up the relationships that I needed to go forward. And so in the church, they have these opportunities with the youth programs and with the encounter camps that we have to deal with emotional wounds. I started realizing that there was a problem, and latching onto these male figures in the church became organic because I submitted myself to the process and I needed to be fathered. So it wasn't my father, but there were fathers in the church that fathered me and are still fathering me today, and have walked this process with me, that have watched me as a young girl now become a woman, a mother, a wife, a director, a contributor to society. Because if we look at society today, the nucleus of the family is under attack. And so we don't have mothers and fathers that are present, not necessarily married together in a household, but a household that is, or a family that's contributing, both mother and father, in a stable way. And so if you look at a lot of people, because my husband and I do a lot of community work, we're very passionate about reaching the disadvantaged, the poor, the fatherless, the addicts. We see when we are with them and we connect, fatherlessness and motherlessness is a real issue. And so I needed to navigate through that and say, how do I relate to male authorities, and how do I glean and learn from them without feeling like I don't know how to relate because I didn't have a father. As much as I had two older brothers, they fulfilled a different function.
Yeah.
But the aspect
They're
of...
not your father.
Yes.
And they don't even know how to father themselves.
Exactly.
Let alone father you.
Yes. So I would say fatherlessness has a different effect on boys as it does on girls, but it's still
Why do you say
damaging.
that?
I see that with my brothers, and I see that with them needing to navigate through life and finding that voice, because they didn't have somebody to ask advice from or show them the way. They needed to kind of plot their own way and glean from those around them, whether that was negative or positive. It has had an effect. And I've seen that with my peers, with friends, with working with youngsters in the church. I see the effect on that, where there is a lot of undealt issues that have come up in people's lives with males and females, and seeing them, both of them are not positive. They're actually negative. It can propel you into positive circumstances and positive decisions, but that void will be there, and you need to deal with that void because it will come out in one way or another, either in your parenting, in your relationship with your spouse. It does come up, that issue, if it's not dealt with.
So looking at the fact that now you had male figures from the church who played a fatherly role to you,
Yes.
how did that assist you to now navigate corporate and be able to build a relationship or relationships with other male figures within the working industry? I mean, I know you had male figures that were older that now you could see as a father figure within the workspace.
Yes.
How did that connection actually make it easier for you to build those relationships and to be able to now operate in an environment where you couldn't speak Afrikaans, but you were now able to deliver on the work that you needed to deliver and with excellence?
So the first thing was just looking at the challenge as an opportunity and not looking at it as a defeat for me to give up, because it was just another obstacle in the road, and saying, okay, it's an obstacle.
So you don't give up?
No, I don't give up easily.
Okay. Why?
I think part of that is I have a story to tell, and having children of my own now, I want to set an example of what it is to overcome. It may not, overcoming it can take different forms, but defeat is not an option. There may be failure, yes, failure is part of life and it's the best way to learn, but I'm not going to stay down. I'm going to come back up. And like I said, my mom has been a great point of reference for me. And I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but my relationship with Jesus Christ has been really an anchor in my life with regards to the decisions, character development, because we all have gifts, right? But if it's not harnessed and used in the right way, it can actually become destructive as well. And it can lose its power because you don't have the bowl to kind of hold that precious thing in, that liquid, whatever you need to offer. The bowl can be cracked, broken. It could be flimsy. And what happens is that you end up abusing that gift. And that's why we find a lot of people today, they have amazing gifts, but they haven't reached their true potential is because they haven't worked on themselves in terms of character. So I've used all these opportunities working under different people, whether I like them or not. I want to learn from them, and I want to learn about myself, because adversity does that. You get to learn who you are and who you're not. And you get to see your deficits as well. And I think we've previously chatted about having these sounding boards, whether it be male or female figures in the form of friendships, mentors, business partners, your spouses, to be sounding boards to say, how do you experience me? Because if you have to do a self-evaluation, we'll all say we're excellent, we're good, we're fine.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with us. We are perfect.
Yeah, everyone else has the problem. Yes. And so I needed to see, where's the problem in me that's limiting me so that I can move past this level? Because that's what growth is. The person that I am today is not the person that I was 10 years ago.
But how do you deal with the change? I read somewhere, and they said that, I was reading about spouses, right? And they said every 7 years, an individual becomes a different individual.
Yes.
Right? And now you're speaking of the fact that you're not the same person that you were 14 years ago, for instance. Meaning if we're going through that 14-year cycle, you had 2 cycles where you changed. The first 7 years, maybe you were starting out in your marriage, then a kid came, then you changed. But now you're a director, and then there was career growth, opportunities, people that you meet, networks, relationships, the church, all of that for you. How did you navigate it? And how do you think other people should actually navigate that?
So I think you have to really assess the kind of person that you are, because one thing that my husband has always pointed out is that no two people are the same. And to expect someone to handle change the way I do is having an unrealistic expectation. We can give each other tools, which I'm hoping that we can do today, but you need to see how that fits into you as a person. If someone has come from, for instance, an abused background, they have a weakened mindset, and there's trauma that's there. All of us have suffered some sort of trauma in our lives in some way or another. It could be maximum, minimum impact. But we need to see, okay, how has this changed me, and how does it help me deal with certain things? One of the things you'd ask me is in terms of navigating my relationships with males in the corporate world, is realizing I don't have to be defensive. I don't have to look for a fight.
You were defensive.
I was very defensive. Also looking for an opportunity to have a fight, to have a throwdown.
You were angry.
Angry. And very often we don't identify. When we take that cord and we're saying, okay, this is the outcome, this is the outlay, this is the output. If we take that rope and we go down deep within ourselves, what is that? So introspection is very important, and being willing to hear the truth from those that are close to you. And looking at the fruits. Fruits never lie. If you look at an apple tree, what does an apple tree produce?
Apples, yeah.
Apples. And so I needed to say, hey, there's some toxic things here that I need to change. How do I go about changing?
But that takes a high level of self-awareness. I mean, to be able to get to that point. I mean, I don't know what would have changed for you to get to the point where you are aware and you're like, let me work on this thing, change it. I mean, and then looking at the fact that you started in litigation, you have to be aware that you don't like it.
Yes.
I mean, if it gets to a point where you say, I don't like it anymore, it has to be because you've realized this is not for me as a person.
Yes.
But it seems like you had a high level of self-awareness that allowed you to be able to identify that you don't like something. And my question is, how did you then develop that awareness? Or did it come organically?
As I mentioned, for me personally, it has a lot to do with my relationship with Jesus and that input into my life.
But you know there are people who have Jesus and they don't have self-awareness.
Yeah, that's true, because we're on this journey, right? So there's certain aspects of me that's not developed, that may be developed in you. And so we need to say, okay, listen, where am I not developed? So not being afraid and not allowing the trauma, the lack of fatherlessness, the challenges to inhibit me, where I accept, this is my fate. I'm going to stay here. If we have a goal and a mission, and we're saying, okay, fine, I have a goal. I want to do X with my life. This means that I'm going to take those steps. What do those steps include? Those steps include being brutally honest with yourself and also realizing there's some measure of change that needs to happen. Is change painful? Yes. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. Any successful person will tell you that if you want to be comfortable, you'll stay where you are. There will not be change. There will not be growth. There will not be impact. You will not be able to tell a story to somebody. It's easy to sit and be a spectator. I'm sure a lot of sports fans can say what the coach is doing wrong, what the players are doing wrong. But when you're playing the game and you've gone through the fitness levels and you've gone through the trial and error and you've made those mistakes there, the problem is that in society, we're not wanting to learn from the mistakes. We want to blame. And we need to come out of this victim mentality. Yes, we can't control things that have happened to us, but we can control what we do with that. And I'm not willing to stand down and say, listen, or raise a generation or invest in a generation of people that are just saying, oh, poor me, this is what's happened. There's no way that I can come around it. I've encountered far too many people, whether it be online, through podcasts, because, I mean, we live in a world full of information.
Yeah.
But what
I think
we do
we've got more information now than ever.
Than
Our
ever
generation
before.
is the most spoiled generation ever.
Yes, but I see there's still a deficit in terms of us wanting to change and adding value to society in a way that it's going to impact generations and not just for ourselves.
Why do you think that is?
I think, like I mentioned, is self-limiting beliefs, and where we've become so self-absorbed that everything is about me, myself, and I. And so we make these decisions in a world where immediate gratification is the order of the day. We don't want to sacrifice. We don't want to go through the pain. We know the saying, no pain, no gain.
Yeah.
But we don't want to go through that. And it's easier to blame people rather than to take responsibility for where you are. There comes a time in your life where you stop blaming your parents, you stop blaming your boss, you stop blaming your spouse, and you start looking at yourself and saying, how can I be a better person? How can I change? How can I grow? How can I reach my potential? How can I realize my dreams? And I said, again, identity has a big role in that. If you don't know who you are, you're going to be people-pleasing day in and day out, and that's draining. Because by the time you go home, you're going to be miserable because you've pleased everybody else. You've emptied yourself everywhere, but what do you invest and put back into you? And we've seen this generation coming behind us that struggle with reading. They struggle with reading. So it's easier to TikTok, and which is wonderful because technology has taken us so much further in terms of access to information.
It decreases attention span.
It decreases. And if we're not paying attention, we're going to miss those things in our lives that need to be changed and enhanced. Because I believe every person on this planet has something to offer in terms of value, in terms of gifting, in terms of ability. But why do we have hobos and why do we have CEOs that maybe came from similar backgrounds?
Why is that? I mean, that's a good question. Why do we have them? Why do we have the exact same people? Obviously not the exact same.
Yes.
But they have the exact same
background.
Set of circumstances, the exact same background. Sometimes in some circumstances, the exact same set of parents.
Yes.
But one will be catapulted to higher heights of success because of what they went through, and the other will be dejected and discouraged because of what they've went through.
I think it's the power of choice. We abscond from that because we realize that we are choosing these micro decisions are contributing to the macro decisions that we make every single day in terms of doing right and wrong, in terms of changing and growing or staying stagnant, in terms of overcoming or remaining defeated. And so we realize that even a no decision is a decision, where we're wanting to accept, this is my lot in life.
No decision is a decision?
No decision is a decision because you're choosing to accept this is my lot in life and there's nothing more or better. So if I came from a background where for instance, I mentioned abuse, I was transparent about that. Abuse is very prevalent in our cultures and in our society today, whether it be spousal abuse, child abuse, substance abuse, it's very prevalent. And we see the effects on society. It's draining society. It's draining people. Suicide rates are up. that has a lot of contribution to even relationships in terms of stability, etc. And so I'm saying, do these circumstances define me? No. If I've made mistakes in my life, I've encountered so many people that have come out of substance abuse. They aren't the people that they were yesterday or 5 years ago, 10 years ago, because it's progressive and saying, I messed up then, but that failure is not going to define me. That incident, that trauma, that abuse, that poverty, that lack of knowledge, lack of education is not going to define me. Today, I'm making a decision to say, I want change. And these are the steps that I'm going to take. Are we going to encounter challenges? Yes. Some more than others, especially if you come from a disadvantaged background. But I'm saying, where there's a will, there's a way. And the problem is that we give up too easily with regards to evolving, changing, and making decisions that are informed, number one, and decisions that are really going to better ourselves and our children. And the next generation of attorneys. I find in my profession, people liken us to sharks. If you look at the large majority of the public that we encounter, they don't trust attorneys. Because they say, no, these guys, no, they're liars. Lawyers are liars. And so I've determined to live my life as a Christian attorney, which is an oxymoron, saying I'm going to walk in truth. I'm going to do what is right. And that takes a level of intentionality. You think about a child. I've got 3 children. My son is 4 months. I've got a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. So we have chaotic order.
And you're a director.
And a director.
Where do you get the time? Jeez.
Yeah, we all got 24 hours in a day, but what we do with it is important. And that really distinguishes those that are able to overcome and those that are willing to just sit. And time you're never going to get back. And I keep on reminding myself of that. I'm never going to get this day back. And what I do with it is going to help me with tomorrow. And so we can waste today and find ourselves sitting in the same circumstances. There's a story in the Bible about these lepers. And they were sitting and they were hungry and they were starving. And, they were willing to sit there. And one of them said, no, man, if we sit here, we die. But if we get up and go into the city, there's a chance that we can survive. And what happened? They survived. They lived because they got up out of their circumstances. They didn't accept, we're lepers, number one. The order of the day at that time, if you were a leper, you weren't allowed to be in contact with people. You had to be outside of the city. They had special camps for them, certain areas. I'm just paraphrasing the word. But they said, no, I'm not going to sit here. I'm not going to allow my race group, my background, my socioeconomic standings to be what I accept in my life as the status quo. I want to supersede that because there's opportunities out there, but there's certain beliefs, there's certain real challenges that we've gone through. But I love to hear Victor's story. I don't know about you. I don't want to hear how someone lost and stayed losing. I want to hear how someone lost, was losing, and now they turned it around for victory. And we can define what that victory looks like. Trying again, overcoming self-doubt, saying yes to a risk or something that's new, being brave, being courageous, saying no to what is wrong, saying no to the fact that I'm not going to be an abuser, I'm not going to be a woman beater, I'm not going to be a drug addict, I'm not going to be living in poverty. Because I say each one of us contribute to society, and if we can contribute in every little small way, it's going to make the difference. But we in this mindset, we believe, what I have to offer is not really worth it. It's not going to change the world that I'm living in. And I'm saying, number one, I'm an attorney. I have a set of skills. I've got knowledge that I've gained over this time. How am I going to use that every day to contribute to people's lives and bring change? Whether it be on a pro bono basis or whether it be writing fees to satisfy a client's need. Same with a mother. When I go home, how am I contributing to I can be this brilliant attorney, but I go home and I'm stressed so I need to fashion my life in such a way that I have boundaries in place, number one. And number two, I'm saying this is the different roles that I fulfill. But in order for me to fulfill these roles, I need to invest into myself. How do I invest as a mother? How do I invest as a wife? How do I invest as a director? I can't be coming here into my place of employ and shouting at people because of what happened at home.
Jeez.
So I'm saying, how do I treat people? Do I see the value in them, or do I see them as a commodity, a means to an end? Because when you do that and you transact in life like that, that's use and abuse.
Of course, yes. And then looking at your career path, and we mentioned earlier on that you were able to have that self-awareness to say, litigation is not for me.
Yes.
Did you know at the time what was for you? Because I know you love company law.
Yes.
You love creating structures for companies, and maybe we can get into a bit of that and tell people what your day-to-day looks like when it comes to that part of your career.
Yes.
So the pivoting to that, did you know at the time when you were pivoting that that's what you wanted, or is that something that just happened organically?
So in my mind, I mentioned that I was trained to think that I need to study and get an education. So I got my LLB and I said, it's like having a matric. Everyone's got an LLB.
Yes.
So I took an opportunity. Yeah. I took an opportunity to get my LLM in mercantile law. And so I was studying that part-time.
Mercantile means business.
Yes.
Business law.
That's correct. So okay. I took a basket full of different modules. So I did tax, competition law, and advanced consumer protection. And I needed to do a research paper. So I did that over 2.5 years. And that's while I was working. So I would work during the day and part of the night. And then early hours in the morning, I would study. Again, sacrifice.
Yes. Having a great relationship
yes.
with pain. It's painful not to sleep and read books.
That's correct. So, and realizing that I didn't know how. I didn't know which way to go. So I took what I was familiar with, studying. And I did well in studying, so I did fairly well. So I thought, let me go down this path again. Got my master's degree and realized I've reached the ceiling of the employment environment that I was in, the law firm that I was in, and I resigned. I just took a leap of faith. I had a 4-month notice.
What do you mean you reached the ceiling?
So I was promoted 3 times over, and I realized I'm not going to get any further in this firm. And there's no opportunity for me to go beyond what they were doing. They were doing third-party litigation. And I gotten accustomed to that. And as I mentioned, it wasn't something that sparked my interest. It didn't make me come alive. So I thought, no. So I resigned with no prospect of employment. I had applied everywhere. And I hadn't gotten a job interview anywhere. And
so why would you resign when you don't have another job? Was the fire burning that much?
Yeah, I think I'd reached a point where I was also just fed up where I was and I wanted something new. And maybe you could call it foolishness of faith. I thought, God is going to open a door for me that no man can shut.
Yeah.
And that door...
Amen, sister.
Yeah,
I can see the brothers and sisters at church saying, go for it. God will provide.
Yeah, you know what I mean? This whole God will provide. And so he opened a window. And that window was through an affiliation that I had. This colleague of mine promised me heaven and earth, a legal advisory position. Mind you, I've got LLB, master's, 5-year post-admission experience. Start working at this company, and I'm sitting in a kitchen with a laptop doing legal costs with no set salary, promises of earning commission. And that's obviously based on when the client pays. And for months on end, I wouldn't have a salary. So jumped through that window, decided, listen, I'm going to go through the fires of adversity. There was bouts of depression that I was working through because I realized I left that job, came here. It didn't look like I was going up. I actually went down.
Yeah. Sometimes you got to go down to go up.
So 9 months in, having my first child as well.
Your child, at the time where you quit the other job to join that firm, the firm with promised commission that you didn't get.
Yes.
You were pregnant?
I found that I was pregnant after I resigned and after I'd left with our first child. And so, yes, being pregnant, now needing to learn a new area of law, legal costs, and focus on that. not having a set salary, there was financial pressure. And I thought to myself, I've done everything that I can. So went back to the drawing board, did my CV, was applying, praying, trying to see where I was never going to go back, because I thought, I don't want to go back, even though I left on good terms, because I believe not in burning bridges. Don't burn bridges. There can be confrontation and conflict, but there's no need to burn bridges. You can have difference of opinion. You can have issues that arise. So went through an agency and they secured an interview for me, a few interviews. And by then, having the dangled carrot and not having to taste it or cook it, I realized again, as I mentioned, knowing who you are and what you want and what you won't accept. Life had shown me. People make promises all the time. Are they going to deliver? Not all the time. Is it going to materialize the way you want it? No. So I learned everything that I could.
So you needed to learn that lesson.
I needed to learn that lesson. I needed to stop being naive, because the corporate world and the business world, I'm sure you know, a lot of big bad wolves there dressed in sheep's clothing. So that wasn't a pleasant experience for me, but I thought I'm going to learn everything that I need to learn. Got textbooks, went through the textbooks on taxations, costs. I thought, let me not waste this opportunity. Did that. Finally got an interview to come and work here.
What year is this? 2018?
2017.
2017, yeah.
Yeah. So came through, started working here at EYS Stewart. There wasn't necessarily a department for me to run or take over. I said, this is the experience that I have. And at that moment, I did everything and anything that came past my desk. If there was a walk-in client, Bianca van Wyk would be called, and I would take it with joy, because I realized that I'm in a transitional period. And I think we should also get out of this fantasy that everything is going to be fine and what we deserve. We have this expectation in life.
That what belongs to you will come to you.
Yes.
It's not coming. Ne? If you don't do anything, it's not coming.
Yes,
Ne?
and if you're not willing to eat humble pie sometimes and just come under the situation and say, you know what, this is what it is at the moment. I'm going to make the best of it, but I'm not going to stay here. And so I would take in all the walk-in clients, and there was an opportunity. My managing partner at the time was my director, and he had a bit of estates, and wasn't really much going on there. So I thought, hey, let me take it on. Did a few short courses, started building up the department. We had a death in our company. Unfortunately, one of our secretaries passed away. I took over the company secretarial work. I started learning how to do drafting MOIs, company structures. Every meeting that my managing partner went to, I asked him if I could join, just to learn. And most of the time it was in Afrikaans. And guess what? I understood the meetings because I learned Afrikaans in the previous workplace.
So meaning,
Yes.
had you taken the decision to say, I'm not going to learn Afrikaans because it's not my language,
Yes.
you wouldn't have been in a position where you understood what was going on in those meetings where you had to do secretarial work as well.
That's correct.
Yo.
So in that, I found also an opportunity within our firm. The legal costs that I learned in that kitchen, I could apply here and save my company and my firm money.
So that guy that brought you in was actually teaching you for the future, and you were not aware.
Wasn't aware of it, but if I was upset about it, was arrogant, was hostile, I would have missed that opportunity. And I think the best advice I ever received as an undergraduate was from my mentor, Dr. Anne Skelton. I served with her at the Center for Child Law, and she said to me, Bianca, I want you to remember something. Anything and everything that you go through in your career will not be wasted if you use it wisely. And I think there's a measure of wisdom that we need to apply in learning the life lessons, whether it's failure, whether it's successes, whether it's just meeting people and valuing the people that you meet. Because you never know when that relationship or that person is going to be a key part of your story.
You know, one thing I've picked up from your story is the fact that you mentioned the word relationships.
Yes.
A lot, and I mean a lot. Why is that important to you so much? The value of relationships and the importance of cultivating relationships.
I think it's very important because we live in a broken society. And I think what we see on TV, as you mentioned, or what we hear is the success story. But you don't hear the people behind those people that are successful in terms of building them up. And if you think about it, you can gain all this wealth and all this knowledge, but if you don't have anyone to share it with, hand it down to, train, or even compare with, what does it mean?
It means nothing. It's worthless.
Yeah, that's why we live in a world today where we live in families. We're born into families because relationship is important. But we've neglected that for the sake of money, materialism, climbing the corporate ladder, making a name for ourselves, and realizing when you get to the top, it's actually lonely.
Because God could have made us to be born from trees if we didn't need to be born in a family.
That's correct.
I mean, that's quite something interesting what you just mentioned, because we're the only species on Earth that's actually connected to family and is emotional. And
Yes.
that's kind of interesting, because we could have been born in the wild and that's it.
Yes,
And you're alone.
that's correct.
So looking at what that has done for you in terms of relationships, coming back to the story you were narrating with your career, and then you're in that meeting with your boss, then what happens after that for you to get to the point where you're now director?
So the reality is that people are always watching you in terms of what you say, what you profess, and what you do. If there's no synergy, if there's no connection between the two, then we're living a lie. There are things that we can talk and say that we would like to do. I understand that process of realization, but our walk and our talk must be the same. So my partners, or now that are my partners, approached me and said, there is this opportunity for directorship. Would I be interested? And I went home and I thought to myself, oh no, I don't know if I'm ready for this.
But after how long, and what had they seen?
Well, I'd been here with them for a year.
Wow.
And there was an opportunity already for directorship. I just wasn't aware of it. I just took the opportunity because they had an attorney associate position available.
Right. And when you came in and you were working, you were not aware that there's a director position available? Or
No.
So you were just doing what you're supposed to do?
Yes.
The everyday work?
Everyday work, and also realizing that whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to give it my best. And I'm also coming in here wanting to learn and understand. Working in an industry, and I think industry to industry is different, but there's a whole lot of ego that can come with having your degrees and having a certain background or knowledge. And if you're coming into a company or into a business relationship thinking you know everything and this is what you're going to do, and not wanting to learn, I think that could be a stumbling block for yourself. You could be your own stumbling block because you'll fall over yourself.
So there's that scripture that says, I think it's Colossians 3 something. It says, whatever you do, do it as though you're doing it for the Lord.
Yes.
For it is for him that you are working and not for men. And the reward comes from him. What does that mean to you? Because it seems like you lived, whether you knew the scripture or not, you lived it.
It's one of my favorite scriptures, actually.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, so Corinthians speaks about that as well, in terms of working unto the Lord and working, giving him your best. I think I'm very well aware of that man may not always appreciate my efforts, or I might not always get an accolade or recognition for it, but I am going to account for it one day. And that will be before the Lord. And in terms of those that are following me, like I mentioned, you don't know who's watching you for a measure of hope or inspiration or guidance. And so realizing that I need to do this not only for myself, but for those who are watching me so that I can leave something behind. A lot of the time we want to leave material things to our children and to those that are coming after us, but we don't leave a sense of character, a sense of worth, of saying, this is how things are done, a good example. And so I think that you can make a lot of money and you can do a lot of these great things, but what about raising up children, raising up those that are following you to be great and do great things, whether it's the small mundane things every day or whether it's on that platform. I've referenced the Word of God a lot because of my relationship with the Lord, and it's what I value. So I hope your listeners won't mind, your viewers won't mind.
If you mind, sorry, I don't mind. So I think this is a safe space. And I mean, anyone that could watch this and mind the Word of God being referenced in a platform that actually allows them to draw inspiration, then they have a problem.
So being faithful with little, if we're not faithful with little, how do you expect to manage much? And so the wheels start coming off as we climb, because we can gain all this experience and knowledge. But as I mentioned, in terms of the character, who you are, your belief system, if that's not firm, you're going to start seeing the wheels come off sooner or later. And we're not looking for perfection here. As I mentioned, my parents got divorced when I was at a young age. Things weren't hunky-dory for me, and neither am I painting this perfect little picture of a Christian lady. I have my flaws, I have my failures, but I'm saying, are we striving for the greater in terms of working with that conscience, that there's a sense of morality, there's a sense of principle that needs to be applied as we go forward for it to be lasting. It's not just going to be something that was here today and gone tomorrow, or I was written about, years ago. Who was I as a person? And I think that we focus on success so much, but if we just focus on being better every day in terms of who we are, it's going to make the impact that we need on our children's lives, on our oikos, on the sphere of influence that we have. Your sphere of influence and my sphere of influence may be different. But does it have an impact on society? Yes, it does.
However small or big.
Yes.
So then you get invited to directorship,
yes,
partnership. What is your response at the time? You said you went home, you had to think about it. Did you not think you are capable, or did you not think you are worthy, or did you not think, what was going on at the time? What did
all
you
of
think?
the above.
Or did you think, glory to God, I've been waiting
No,
for it?
all of the above. All that self-doubt came creeping in, all those voices that you can't, this girl of color this is not where you belong. It's too much for you. And I realized there was a part of my life that I ignored, which was, business acumen and running a business, which I was closed off to because I was trained to work for somebody.
Yes,
that was the belief system.
Yeah, these people challenging you, saying we see business acumen in you.
Yes.
Wow.
So there was an opportunity for me to fill the directorship role. It's been now for 7 years. I'm going into my 7th year. It hasn't been easy because my MD has also put me through the paces in terms of, learning, gleaning, making decisions, being accountable, showing up, going the extra mile, looking for ways to add value to the company, understanding financials. I sat in my first financial meeting. I didn't know if I was coming or going. I thought to myself, gee, I left maths at school. Like, why is this following me here? Same with estates. My partner had a measure of understanding estates and the intricacies of estates. And I needed to take it further and say, how am I going to grow and develop? And the way we do it is by experience. I needed to keep on saying yes to the different, whether it was a big estate or small estate, whether it is a big company or a small company, whether it's somebody starting out. I said, okay, how am I going to take this and run with it to invest into people's lives, give them good legal advice, but also grow myself as a professional? And so 7 years in, I'm able to also mentor attorneys that are coming through the profession, coming through the ranks and saying, this is the do's and don'ts. I can tell you now, somebody can come here with distinctions and a whole lot of knowledge, but if they've got a poor attitude, I struggle to work with him. If I have somebody who maybe doesn't have a set of skills, I can work with them, I can develop them, I can teach them if they're willing.
So you don't think attitude can be taught, but rather skills only?
Attitude can be learned. It can be. It can be if you're willing to. If you're willing to come out of your bubble and acknowledge that this is not working for you, it's not working for us, it's not going to work for you in the future, and it probably hasn't worked for you in the past. And I think that's what happened with my managing directors and partners, is that I've really adopted an attitude of learning, but also finding my voice and saying, this is where I think we should go in terms of vision, because there's a marrying of the older generation and the younger generation.
Absolutely.
And we have something to offer. Our generation and younger is perceived as those that are self-entitled and lazy, and we want to be influencers and YouTubers and all of that. But the culture has changed and society has evolved. But if we can marry the two generations together, we can do something brilliant. And whether you're self-taught or self-made, having these kinds of relationships, as I mentioned, is so important. And so I don't think I would be where I am today in terms of me studying further and developing myself and saying yes to directorship if it wasn't for the adverse circumstances, if it wasn't for the opportunities that were clothed in a whole lot of work, and also the relationships where I'm saying, listen, this person, if you have to look at my managing partner, he's in his 60s, he's a white Afrikaans male, but we've developed a very good relationship because I see the value in him and I trust that he sees the value in me, in growing two families, a business together, to offer Gauteng, South Africa, international businesses, legal services that I think maybe I wouldn't have thought I could have ever done before. I mean, he started this firm when I was born. So Imagine that in terms of destiny. You never know where you're going to land up, right?
Yes. And how important is excellence to you as an individual?
It's very important because it's tied to reputation. It's part of who I am, who you are. There's certain qualities that you would want to esteem, and excellence is one of mine. And I'm striving for that every day. Does that mean that I am as good as a director at ENS or Bowman and Gilfin or any of the other top 5 law firms? I may not be, but I'm excellent where I need to be right now. And do I want to grow in excellence? Yes, it's important because it's tied to my reputation. When people meet me, they want to know that I'm giving them my best and I'm not going to settle for anything else. And if I can't give them my best, I'm going to refer them to someone who can. And I think that's part of excellence, is also knowing what you can and can't do at where you are at the moment. And saying, this is why I'm going to partner, I'm going to network, I'm going to refer you to witness that's going to be able to help you. And that's part of excellence, because you're realizing, listen, at this moment in time, I don't possess this. I'm getting there, but I need help. And that's part of the excellence journey, is saying, in every area that I find myself in, how can I improve? How can I grow? And it really is a mixed match of juggling your role as a wife and myself, a wife, a mother, director, a contributor to society in terms of the community work that my husband and I do, a church member, a daughter. Because as you know, we're not just living for ourselves. We want to contribute and help our families. So that there is all saying, okay, where are the needs? Where can I fulfill those needs? And where do I need to grow? Where do I need help in this part of this excellence journey? Because it's not about me, myself, and I. It's about a collective offering that I'm giving to every role that I find myself in, because I can't do it on my own. If I would, I think I'd be lying in a hospital with drips or in a mental institution, because it's just too much to handle.
So what's the portfolio of work that you are working on within the firm now? Obviously director, but you've got your specialties.
Yes.
The things that these are the things that I do that I'm good at. What are they?
Estate planning and estate administration is something that I've developed in, and company structures and company secretarial work. So that's registering companies, shareholders agreements, memorandum of incorporation, customized, company and trust structures, because I do trust administration as well. So it's those 3 areas that I've honed in on and chosen to focus on.
But there's a part where you talked about structures, company structures, as well as estate planning. You just mentioned it now. I just want you to go deeper on that. When I asked you about the portfolio of work that you are working on now, I want to know more on estate planning, exactly what that entails, and then also get into company structures and tell us exactly what it entails, and also tell me the connection between the two, right? Because one might be having a company, it's growing, but they need estate planning and succession planning to be able to hand over to the next generation.
Yes.
And what sort of structures do they need to put in place to successfully do that?
All right, estate planning effectively is protecting your assets. And that's from the time you acquire them, accumulate them, and then when you pass away. So that starts, you can start off with drafting a will, which in any case could be done by a professional attorney, by yourself, which I don't advise, because there's certain aspects of interpretation or certain aspects you may miss in drafting a will. So we always recommend that an attorney drafts a will for you. And then that goes into your financial planning, whether you have life insurances, retirement annuities, provident funds, pensions, credit life policies, where you've got loans that you've taken out, whether for business or for your home, for instance, home loans. And then we also look at your company structures, whether you've got company structures in place and whether those are maintained on a regular basis. That's your shareholders agreements, buy and sell agreements, in terms of the documents that are used to protect yourself going forward. For instance, as a director, have you signed suretyship for any loans that are in place? And with yourself being in the entrepreneurial sector and sphere, you notice that business is not something that grows in straight lines. You have your ups and downs. And so preparing for those difficult times in business, that your family and your assets are protected while you're alive and when you pass away.
Okay. So how does that tie into trusts and company structures? Are those things, do they work hand in hand? How does it work?
Yes, so they work hand in hand. As I mentioned, estate planning is for protection of your assets. It's for you to save on expenses, for your administration of estates, to save on taxes. If you structure your company, your trust, or your companies and your will in a way that they are all reading the same and they work well together. So we've had instances where you have companies, but your trust is a shareholder. And in that, you are now building your portfolio in the trust and not having to pay estate duty later because most of your assets are in the trust already.
Okay.
And understanding trust administration works with the company and works with your estate planning to your benefit. If you've got minor children, you want to also ensure that they are taken care of. So your will would then appoint a guardian that would take care of them. You don't want to die without a will, which is called intestate, and it is governed by the laws of intestate succession, where if there's any cash that's available to a minor who's under the age of 18, that goes to the guardian fund for the government to manage. You can't invest that. You have to then go and apply for funds, prove that those funds are needed for a minor. And then also having an executor that's appointed in your will. You want to have someone that's trustworthy, that you know that's going to execute your final wishes according to what you would like to happen with your assets. So having that plan of succession with your assets in your estate, as well as a plan of succession in your company, is very important. You don't want the company and everything you've invested die with you. You want it to go on. And that's the whole thing of generating generational wealth and legacy, is that you want it to be perpetuated through generations. And that's what trusts do. It can work up to 4 generations if you structure it in such a way that you list your beneficiaries correctly, you draft your trust deed. And all of this may be overwhelming to someone who's just starting off. But we're saying start somewhere. Start with drafting a will. And if that's going to cost you money, look for opportunities where service providers like attorneys, accountants, tax practitioners, business advisors and financial advisors are making offers available. For instance, in September, we as attorneys usually have Wills Week, where the Legal Practice Council encourages us to serve the public by drafting wills for free. Why not take that opportunity? service providers are always looking to make new clients, including ourselves.
Yes.
So we're willing to offer things that are, and advices or opportunities that would benefit them and us to grow our clientele base, but also to serve the public. So, coming to a professional and saying, I want more understanding on how this would work or affect me would be, let's start from the beginning. We had previously had a discussion about this being the foundation of a building. The foundation of a building is very important. My daughter loves architecture at such a young age. She loves buildings. And one of her favorite buildings is the Burj Khalifa. Nice. The Burj Khalifa is the tallest building in the world, 829 meters, if I'm not mistaken. But the architects and the engineers have mentioned that the higher you go, the deeper the foundations have to be. So I look at estate planning, company structures, financial advice, all as those foundational poles and rafts and steel structures that are going to help you to build the legacy, to build the protection you need for your assets and for your family going forward by starting small, yes, but being wise and prudent and saying, as I develop my portfolio, as I dispose of assets, as I accumulate assets, as my marital status changes, as my family expands, these are the kinds of things that I'm putting in place to protect me and my family. I found that there are many entrepreneurs and clients that have gone into business, but they married in community of property. How can we now safeguard them? How can we safeguard their family home? How can we provide for their children if something happens to them? So there are legal instruments that we can use as we go forward, but we need to know where you are and where you're at. It's difficult to do estate planning if you've developed a portfolio of 50 million rand. There are going to be certain expenses and legal expenses that you're going to incur, which you could have saved if you just started.
What are those expenses for at that moment?
So
move properties,
yes,
shares? Yeah.
That's correct. So moving shares, moving properties, you'll have transfer costs. You can trigger capital gains because it's disposing of assets, shares. So all of these kinds of things, you need to have the proper legal advice to get a holistic view of how you need to estate plan and plan your estate. So your estate and my estate may be different, but we can tailor that advice to what you need right now and going forward. And we always advise that estate planning is something that's ongoing, and we should be revisiting these structures at least once a year to look at where you're at in your life. Have you disposed of this asset? Have you accumulated more assets? Have you got a child that needs, care for the future? One of the things I've also realized with estate planning and having proper structures is that you limit the litigation, you limit the family disputes, because something about death triggers a backlog of issues with the family that when you don't have a will in place and you don't have these structures, you have uncles and aunts and family members and even spouses while they're grieving, or children while they're grieving, trying to sort out problems that should have been sorted out while you were alive. For instance, bringing your taxes up to date, making sure that you get proper tax advice and not taking the shortcuts now, and then your estate pays later, and then your children are left without the legacy that you wanted to leave for them, whether it be a house, money, shares, or personal items that you have.
Wow. I think we're going to have to make a part 2 just to go in depth in terms of estate planning and company structures.
Yes.
Is that a promise?
It's a promise that I'll keep. I'm a woman of my word.
Thank you so much. And then before we draw to a close, earlier on you mentioned something about pain, right? Mm-hmm. And it sparked a question in my mind that why is it so easy for you to relate with pain the way you do now? To be able to say, I don't think I would be where I am without the trauma, without the pain, without the struggles. Why does it sound like you say to yourself, I wouldn't be the person that I am now had I not been through those things?
I think there's a level of adversity and pain that develops aspects of compassion and empathy, resilience, as I mentioned. If you think about going to the gym and doing a workout, you're not going to develop those muscles without some sort of resistance. And likewise, we won't develop or sharpen aspects within us. We all have natural giftings, as I mentioned, and abilities. But for us to develop and grow, those adversities have helped me say, listen, this is what life has dished out to me, but this is not what I'm going to just accept, as I mentioned. And in that, I think overcoming those things and looking back, if I didn't push past that, I think that I would have succumbed to that pain. And I would have ended a lot of the dreams and a lot of the relationships and a lot of who I am today, even marriage, for instance. The fact that my parents got divorced, if I internalized that, I wouldn't be married today.
You would have taken it personally.
Yes.
Wow.
I would have.
So there's a young person watching right now, and they're saying, wow, what an incredible lady, but she's well-spoken. She's educated. I'm not. And I don't know where to go. If you were to be given an opportunity to speak to that young person through that camera there, look him in the eyes as they're watching, what would be your words of encouragement, teaching, or inspiration to them?
I'd like to say to that young person listening to us today that you are valued, and as long as you have breath in your lungs, there is purpose. It's just a matter of you digging deep within yourself and finding what that purpose is. Starting somewhere, start today, whether it be writing down those dreams or goals, whether it be finding that job, whether it be finding a mentor to help you, whether it be receiving counseling for the trauma that you've gone through. Start today with something. Say yes to yourself, say yes to purpose, and say yes to relationships that are going to get you where you need to go. As long as you have breath, as long as you have time, you can still make something of your life and bring the change that you want to see, not only to yourself, but the world around you.
Okay. So I want you to close for us with your favorite quote. What's your favorite quote? Could be from the Bible, could be from the book you read, could be from the Constitution of South Africa, because you've read it.
Yes, we've read it. Whether it's fully applied, that's another story.
We must get into that one next time and delve into it.
Well, as I mentioned, a follower of Christ, so one of my favorite scriptures that has been something that's helped me navigate through the highs and lows of life is Proverbs 3:5-6. It says, trust the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. And I've realized that no matter where this road takes me, I have God that's going to work things out for me as long as I'm willing to work on myself and willing to learn the lessons. So that's my favorite scripture.
This was an amazing, amazing interview. And I love the fact that you know who your anchor is.
Yes.
And you don't shy away from letting other people know what's been anchoring you all these years, you know? Because sometimes, in as much as we are chasing all these accolades, chasing all this amazing work that we're doing, we tend to forget to remind other people where they can be anchored, you know, because people will end up looking to you, but you are not Christ.
Yes.
You know, and I love the fact that your story is authentic. And I love the fact that you're an amazing attorney. I mean, I've seen the work that you do.
Thank you, witness.
You know, so I love that as well. And I'm going to close by saying thank you for joining us on the Winner's Circle and for adding value to our communities.
Thank you.
Our community, right? And for those of you who are part of our community, please check out their work. EYS Attorneys, they're based in Pretoria.
Yes.
And obviously they operate across Gauteng, South Africa, and
yes,
internationally.
That's correct.
Right. So where do they find you guys? Are you guys on Instagram?
We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, and we have our website. It's www.eyslaw.co.za. We didn't get much into estate planning and company structures, but that's for another time.
Right. So she's basically saying there's a part 2 where we're going to be sitting down and talking about estate planning, company structures, shareholders agreements, building a company, and all of those things. And why it's
Establishing a
important.
trust, all of that.
All of that.
All for free, right here on the Winner's Circle. How's that?
How's that? It's a deal. I'm going to close with the scripture that I just heard from her. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him and he will direct your path. From me and my team broadcasting from EYS Attorneys in Brooklyn, Pretoria, it's more than just money. See you in the next episode. Ciao, ciao.